that I see in my workspace. So as it says here, getting started, we're going to go into our effective communication. And again, the whole goal of this particular webinar is we want to strengthen relationships, not only in a workplace, but in your home. You know, some people are married with your children, right? Let's say you have teenagers. The whole key is to see a relationship strengthen. So a quick reminder here is this webinar is going to last about 40 minutes because we want to give time for Q&A. And then if you are a member of the organization, we're actually going to have the replay posted on our website on cbwnitl.org. And there is where our members can log in, access the additional resources and this webinar along with the slide deck. Now we're going to go into the content, just a little bit of the content here. So the first thing we're going to talk about is understanding communication, right? So when it comes to understanding communication, really defining communication, and as I stated earlier, different communication styles. We're also going to talk about a few types of communication: verbal, written, and then also just sharing communication tools. There are a lot of tools, especially in a time that we're living in, the age of technology, so to speak, that we can use that will make us have the ability to communicate effectively. And then, of course, listening skills. One thing I've learned is when it comes to properly communicating, you also want to understand or have the ability to listen. It takes two to converse and have a conversation. So if someone else is speaking to me, right, just like how we received initially when we started, we received the feedback. If someone else is speaking to me, then I want to be able to understand what they are saying, not only so I can respond, but so I can actually have clarification. So that's a part of that listening skills. And then last, we're going to talk about presentation and digital skills. What does it mean to present? What type of digital skills are needed? And just bringing that all in first. I'm sorry, full circle. All right, so we can go to the next slide. So again, introducing myself, as it says here, you can see my image here. My name is Tanicia, right? Again, I'm going to be facilitating and just guiding us through this webinar today. I've been a founding member of the Christian Business Women Network International since 2022, and we are an organization that's built on core principles and values. One of our goals is to educate our audience to be well-rounded, spirit, soul, and body. So we're really big on professional development, right? And that professional development can bridge across in the educational spectrum, or as we've seen some people from the VA that has joined. So there are different ways that professional development can be built up. And one thing, that's one of our core values. So a little about me. I am in the digital e-commerce space. I am actually a product manager for the brands such as KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut. And I've been in the technology field for over 15 years. I have a passion for freelance writing, and I enjoy combining my unique writing skill set with technology and sharing it with my audience, right? So at this time, I have a love for anything digital marketing, digital products, right? Being able to just, ebooks. I just love anything digital. And as it says here, I get anything that I can do to not only strengthen my communication, but make, our process or our workflow easy, especially at my job, then that comes through that communication. And I like that automation piece of it. So just sharing here, the webinar is going to help us to understand communication and how to bridge the gap between broken communication in everyday life. And moving on, we want to start out with an icebreaker here. I'm not sure how many of you have used the word cloud, but a word where you get interactive. As I stated, we want this to be interactive. We want everyone to be able to join in. So on this word cloud, if you are on a device where you can scan the QR code, we want you to go ahead on and scan that QR code. Or if you're able to type in URL, you can type that in. and just input that event code that's here on the screen, the NKSFY.
Standing out that a lot of people are selecting and speaking effectively, right? And that does tie in, like what you stated, with taking a public speaking class, the Toastmasters, just different things to try to have that well-rounded communication. And just like, there are different forms, as we'll talk about it, as far as when it comes to communication. For example, technology issues, right? That can cause a barrier to be able to communicate. I was just on and then, my computer froze. So how do I come across that barrier? You have to keep that communication flowing, right? You can't allow it to have a stop in it. So I really like this. One that I see here is tone in the way you speak. That's important because I can say something and it's not meant to sound being negative, but my tone of voice, did I raise my voice, or was I a little over aggressive, right? Just trying to figure out that tone whenever you're speaking to people. And that's really important, especially if some of you have children. Put a 1 in the chat, if you have children. But when you're talking to children, depending on the tone, they're going to receive what you're saying the wrong way. So we always want to be mindful with our communication with whoever we're working with. It can be a coworker, right? And like I stated, it can be children. It can be an adult, right? And a child that's talking to an adult. However it goes, we just want to make sure that we're effectively communicating that. So I definitely want to thank you guys for joining in on this word cloud. And we're going to get into the presentation with no more interruptions. All right, so getting into our first part as we talk about the understanding communication. 3 things that we want to talk about under this topic is what is communication, different communication styles, and what are different barriers to communication. And I think a lot of us will find this interesting and interactive, so we still want to hear from you all. You can put your feedback in the chat whenever we ask questions for you to just be able to let us know your input when it comes to understanding communication. So I like this quote here. It talks about communication, and it says that good communication is the bridge between confusion and clarity. So if I want to understand what you're stating to me, then I need you to actually just articulate it, right, in a way that I can receive it. And when there is good communication, it doesn't leave you confused or needing clarity. You will have clarity about what's stated to you because it was communicated effectively. So let's get into the next slide. All right, understanding communication. As shared, we're just going to define communication a little bit, and then we'll be able to touch on a few of these topics. So communication is the ability to share, give, and provide information. It also involves transmitting, receiving, and interpreting messages through various channels, such as verbal or written language, body language, gestures, or visual aids. Effective communication goes beyond merely exchanging information, but it also involves clarity. Again, just when you're talking to someone and you two are conversing, you want what's being talked about to have clarity. It also provides understanding and the ability to convey your messages accurately, okay? And so this helps to achieve the desired outcome of what you are communicating about. And so it is a fundamental skill that's crucial in personal relationships, professional settings, and societal interactions. And I know that we all can agree. So I really like this, just getting into the communication styles. And as we talk about this, I would like for you all to put in the chat, right, what is your specific communication style? Now, we're only going to hone in on 4 communication styles, but there are quite a few, guys. I would say 6 to 8. And so I'll give a little bit of background after we go through these, what my initial communication style has always been, and the pathway that I'm taking to have a more effective communication. So it says that there are different communication styles when we interact with others. Conversation styles, it actually varies by culture. So a lot of times it can be just cultural way that someone may communicate. It can also be situational. So depending on the situation or what occurs, we may communicate differently. And personal factors, right? So a personal factor really plays a part in this, understanding just what's going on at that time and what are the factors around it. And so effective communication involves being aware of your style and adapting it appropriately to promote understanding and a productive dialogue. So the first communication style we want to hone in on is the passive communicator, okay? So we did a few bullet points under each communication style, and then again, you may notice yourself in all of these, or you may lean from one side to another, but we definitely want to hear your feedback as we talk about these first two styles. The first one is a passive communicator. This person normally avoids conflict, right? So it's more of a, if you ever heard of someone or something that is passive aggressive, they avoid conflict. They don't want to be thrown under the bus, right? So they just avoid any type of conflict or communication at all. This person also may prioritize the feelings and opinions of others over their own, and they also defer to others to make decisions. So again, since they avoid conflict, they're also avoiding accountability, which leads to avoidance of any type of conflict or any further tension. So this person kind of just like, again, as it states, they like to be passive and kind of just go along to get along. So they will appear timid, hesitant, and submissive, always yielding to the demands of others. And, you know, this is interesting because even if they don't agree, right, with what's being communicated, they are afraid to speak up, right? And this can cause the anxiety that someone put in a word cloud. It's going to cause it because their communication style is passive. So they're timid, they're hesitant, and they're actually afraid to express their opinions to others or provide input to the group or say, well, I have a suggestion. You know, they're just passive. And so they kind of go along and get along. Well, the result of this type of communication, it brings a lot of misunderstandings and it causes a lack of confidence. If I'm a passive communicator and I normally defer to others to make decisions for me, to think for me, because I don't want the accountability and I want to avoid conflict, then that's going to cause a lot of misunderstandings because we're not communicating effectively. Okay. The next one that we have is the assertive communicator. And it's kind of a step up from the passive communicator. They are able to express their thoughts and needs. They have the ability to share opinions clearly and confidently. And they always strive for open and direct communication without being aggressive or disrespectful. And normally, if you are an assertive communicator, you have clear communication with confidence. And this normally leads to better understanding and stronger relationships. So I want to take a little bit of time out to see if any of you want to put in the chat, out of these two, which one would you say you are? Are you more of a passive communicator or an assertive communicator? Okay. I see Kay says she's assertive. That's good. Well, I'll say, okay, Barry, passive, Jessica, okay. And that's how I was at first as well. I was very passive. And I think that does bring in the anxiety and also just feeling hesitant, right? And so what you normally do, you submit to the opinion of others, even if you don't agree. So it makes it hard to collaborate. I agree, Annette. Yeah, definitely. Just working on being more assertive, especially when you tend to be passive. This is good. Thank you, Joy. Assertive. Wow. So let's go to the next slide. We want to look at the other two communication styles. All right. I really like these communication styles. And the reason I like them is because it's, you're able to, well, I'll go through them and then you'll see. So again, we have two more. The first communicator is a collaborative communicator. This is the one I really admire because you can get a lot more done, especially on a team, when people are willing to communicate and collaborate effectively. So I've learned that communication and collaboration goes hand in hand. If we're unable to communicate effectively about what's needed for a team project or in a home, in a workplace, wherever you are, if I can't communicate, effectively in that place, it's going to make it hard to collaborate. And so a collaborative communicator always emphasizes cooperation, right? They cooperate they're probably over cooperated. They are active listeners. And I love this because as we stated earlier, I'm learning, and I'm sure a lot of you are probably learning or learning now, that when it comes to proper communication, it's not always us speaking, but it's a lot of times us listening, being an active listener and understanding what's needed, what's being presented to us. How can I collaborate, right, with this individual? How can I collaborate with my team to ensure that we have what we need for a project or anything along those lines? Always seeking a winning solution. I love that one because when you are a collaborative communicator, you want to make sure that everyone wins. Collaboration is a team effort. So you're not trying to just win on your own or do everything for yourself, but you're interested in collaborating. You want to see the big picture of everyone winning, right? It's like at my job, we always do weekly wins, and then we also have daily wins. And what we do, we use Slack, which is one of our communication tools, and we like to communicate with one another how someone that we, for example, I have a new hire that I worked with yesterday, and he needed help on a project. Now, he could have been more passive and try to figure it out on his own, but he became collaborative. He reached out to our team, and he wanted to work on his project together. And we were able to get it done quicker, right, in a group effort, as opposed to him just trying to figure it out on his own because he didn't want to ask. So it also helped with him learning something new. We all learned something new. And then afterwards, we celebrated our wins. How do we do that? Well, in Slack, which is our communication tool, we were able to just, we send emojis and we let everyone in our organization know, hey, this person is a good collaborator. This person is a team player. And so we sought the winning solution in that case. And then we, were able to also just let others know how that collaboration method allowed everyone to win. So our client was happy, the new hire, he was happy, and everyone had that winning solution. And that's how someone that's a collaborator and a communicator, that's how they normally are. They always encourage open dialogue while valuing the input of others. And I really love that. If there's someone that comes to me to communicate with me about an issue, a project, something that needs to be done, well, we want to encourage that open dialogue. It's kind of like in your workplace. If you ever heard of the open door policy, I don't know about you, but I love it when you have a leader or a boss that have an open door policy where you can go, you can speak to them, you can let them know something that, you may have any questions or concerns about, right? And so that encourages that dialogue, right? And then that leader, for the most part, when they have that open door policy, should also value the input of others. And that's how you're going to continue to have that collaboration on your team. You have that open door policy and everyone is able to communicate. So the result is the one that is a collaborative communicator is they will become a great problem solver and they thrive in team environments. So in my case, as I stated earlier, I work in the IT field. So working in IT, you have to become a problem solver. I don't know if any of you are on, if you work in the IT field, I would definitely love to see it in the chat. But when you're in the IT field, you have to be able to solve the problem, get the information, say there is a technical issue, well, how do you keep it going, right? You never want to sweat under pressure. And these are some of the things that you learn along the lines of working in that particular field, and it makes you a great problem solver. And that person thrives in a team environment because they're not really going to sweat under pressure, right? Because they're seeking for a solution. They're not, bringing the problem. And the last communication style, which I love, is the analytical communicator. The analytical communicator is a direct communicator. Okay? So you don't have to worry or wonder about what they are saying. They are very direct. They're logical, which is very important. You want someone that's just logical in anything that they are doing. They are detail oriented. Okay. And that's their mindset. Like their mind is just to be detail oriented. How can I be a direct communicator? How can I just, be logical? This is a person that likes to do a lot of building blocks. An analytical communicator also focuses on facts. You really don't have to bring them all the fluff. They just want the facts, right? What's the facts? What's the problem? And then again, give me data, give me evidence, right? And so this is the person that when you go to bring them a problem or, you need help in a specific area, they're going to probe you for questions. So sometimes we'll feel like they're asking me so many questions, but the reason they're asking questions is because they're trying to get more data. And again, it reminds me of the field of working in, especially with technology. Yes. Someone said the get to the point communicator. They don't want the fluff. They don't want you to go around the mulberry bush, so to speak. They're just asking you, what's the problem? Give me the facts. I want the data, right? This is a person that if you had a different learning style, they may want to see charts, visuals, aids, different things like that, because they are very analytical. Okay. And then they're very good in professional and technical settings. So the result of this type of person is it always leads to better understanding and a productive relationship. So they're always going to have a better understanding of what's needed and in a productive relationship because they're very direct. You don't have to wonder what they are saying. You don't have to have them beat around the bush. There's nothing that, as far as like questioning, what does this person mean? You don't have anything like that because, again, they are going to be very direct with you. And so we can go to the next slide. So going through this, we want to talk about certain barriers to communication. And before I go into this slide, have you guys, you can put it in the chat or however you want to communicate it. Have you experienced any barriers to communication besides what we have here? What are some barriers that you've seen that have made communication hard with people? And let's see if we get any. Lack of comprehension. That's a good one. So sometimes you have people that lack comprehension. And so because they don't understand what's being said, it does cause a barrier. So you're talking to this person, you may be giving them the issue or an idea, but if they're unable to comprehend it, it doesn't make any sense. That's really good, Barry. Speaking to someone that's not really listening. This is important because just think about if you have a project and you're talking to them and they're not listening. So you essentially wasted your time. And your time is important. It's very valuable, right? But they're not listening. And that's almost like a condescending attitude. That means that they're not interested. So not only are they not listening, they're not interested. Let's see, subjective beliefs. That's a good one, Zamora. Subjective beliefs. So I already have a preconceived notion, right? And I think that's kind of ties into the personal biases. I have a preconceived notion. My mind is already made up, right? And so that causes a barrier to communication. So these are really good. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of those here. We only placed 4 here. Again, if you guys ever just take the time out to really study the subject of communication, is very exhaustive, but it gives you a great amount of information. So when there is a communication barrier, it normally means there is a hindrance, right? And with that hindrance or blockage, and so it stops the flow of communication. It's just like anything in your home with plumbing or in your vehicle. If something is blocked or there's a hindrance, right, there's something in the middle that's stopping that flow of that communication. So like the image that we have here on the screen, communication, you see one person, and then between them is a big gap, and then you have another person. That's just that big gap and that barrier to that communication. All right, so some of the barriers to communication are a lack of attention or interest. When people are not fully engaged, just like shared in a chat, or interested in the communication process, then that's a barrier, because you're talking to someone about something that's important to you. It's also important for the workplace and the job. And because they're not engaged or interested, it automatically causes a barrier. The next one is information overload. You know, sometimes when you're talking to someone and you give them an excessive amount of information to process, their mind will automatically shut down. It's too much information to process at that time. And so we have to be mindful of that. We don't want to overload anyone, right, with information. We want to be clear, concise, and even understanding or making sure that the person or our audience understands what we are trying to, engage them with, and ensure that you're on one page. The next one is the personal biases and prejudices. So you can have a preconceived notion, just as shared in a chat, right? You can have a stereotype and a bias. And when you have that, that is really bad, because you can have a stereotype and a bias. And when you have that, that's really bad, because with that stereotype and that bias, you know, you're not understanding what that person is saying. You know, they're not effectively even communicating, but you're not going to receive what they're saying. I already have my set of beliefs. I already believe what I believe. And so that's an automatic hindrance to the flow and blockage in our communication. And the last one is an emotional barrier, which is very important. I think someone mentioned it earlier when they talked about the kind of like the anxiety, right? That's one of the things that we have here under the emotional barriers. You know, some people are just afraid of people. And I think it just comes with the societal type of, I don't want to say norms, but especially in a workplace, you have people that are afraid of their boss. You know, there's the CEO, there's a director, and there's a fear. You know, you just have this fear of what they may say, and that emotional barrier, it causes an issue. So you're fearful of the response, or if you're having a heated argument or conversation, you may have anger that may cause an emotional barrier, and then even stress. All of this interferes with you communicating effectively. And so these are some of the barriers that can really cause that communication to actually just be off. And so, yeah, we want you to be mindful of that, you know, those different barriers. I think we've all, if we, did a poll, we've all experienced this. And so these are some of the things to be mindful of. And I saw in a chat where Jessica said, even when you have someone that's on their phone, you have a meeting, right? Especially a face-to-face meeting, or you're talking to your teenager, if any of you have teenagers, and they're on their phone, they're text messaging, they're on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, right? So basically they're not paying any attention, and it ties back into just a lack of attention or interest. Okay, we can go to the next one. So before we go on, we're just going to go through talking a little bit about different communication styles, like verbal and written, and then effective communication tools. But we definitely want to have you all have a session, a Q&A session. So as we go through these, if you have any questions, please bring them to the table. We'll allow them time for everyone to come off mute, give your feedback, because we definitely want to ensure that you've received value from this. So we want to talk about also verbal communication. Verbal communication is like what we're doing right now, right? So we're verbally communicating, which means that we share our thoughts through talking. And believe it or not, in today's society, a lot of people have a hard time expressing themselves verbally because they can hide behind technology. It's easier to, hide behind a device. It's easier for people to actually hide behind just, Messenger, right? Because they don't have to actually open up their mouth and talk. But this is one of the communication styles that we're noticing a lot of people will actually still need to work on. There's still a need to work on verbal communication. So a few aspects of verbal communication, it could be one-on-one communication. If you have a talk with your employees, your supervisor, your spouse, or in a private meeting, you can have a group conversation. We have a small group here in this meeting, in this webinar. You can have a brainstorming session, which means that, hey, let's get together. Again, that ties in with the collaboration. We're going to brainstorm to work through our project so that we can get to a desired goal. And then you can have public speaking, and that public speaking entails that verbal communication. So if you look at the chart on the screen in that lower right-hand corner, a lot of our vocal elements, which is pitch, tone, our rate, our volume, even rhythm, that's 38% of our communication. And then the other you have your 55%, that's nonverbal. So a nonverbal communication is our gesture, our posture, right? Facial expression, where you're talking to someone, you may have an employee or a coworker that may roll their eyes or walking off while you're talking to them. See, that's a nonverbal communication. And so that actually takes up a bigger percentage. So although we have our vocal elements where I can talk and communicate and converse with you and let you know if something is bothering me, a lot of people result in non-verbal gestures, postures, facial expressions, because they lack the ability to verbally communicate. Okay, so let's go to the next form. And then you have written communication. As I shared at the beginning, this is my favorite. Okay, so I've authored 3 books so far, right? And then I also work with others to help them publish books and just different projects. And so I really like the form of written communication, even in the workplace. If we have a how-to article, a technical document, anything that's needed on my job, I always like to provide that written communication because I think that's good to go along with verbal communication. So written communication can take various forms. It can include letters, emails, memos, reports, messages, the chat, like what we have here. It's just different conversations and styles that entails that written communication. And some of the aspects of written communication, it allows for careful thoughts and revision. It helps to organize your ideas and complex thoughts. So if you are a complex thinker, it's good to journal your thoughts first, and then you can write it out and you can revise it, right? And this allows you to carefully consider what you are saying when you write out your thoughts. This is an effective form of communication, and journaling is really relaxing. If you like to write, then you can write out your notes in a journal. I have a ton of journals here in my office, and it's just from different thoughts that have come to me. And so written communication is also good for non-face-to-face interaction. I've had some people, they'll present an idea to me, and I'll ask them, hey, can you send me a follow-up email so that I can actually, understand what you are stating to me and it's in written form. So that's also a different type of learning that some people like, is that written communication. And we can go to the next one. All right, so effective communication skills, tools. I could have, added my own tools, which I'll highlight a few that I actually enjoy, right? And I also want to know what tools you all enjoy. But I really like this chart by Capterra. They are a good, marketing company. And so they added the chart about effective communication tools. And so looking at the first one, you see the email. Email is good for updating large groups. I agree. If I needed to send an email blast to a large group, that is a very effective tool for communicating. But it says that it's bad for time-sensitive collaboration. That's correct. So one rule I have in the workplace, I would say, is that if there is a time-sensitive issue that I need to collaborate on, we always tell our team to pick up the phone. So you want to pick up the phone if you can to reach out to that person directly. Email is not the best form for that. And it also works good with collaboration tool meetings. So like Google Calendar, Google Workspace is a very great tool. And that's where the email also ties in. So let's think about some collaboration tools. Some good collaboration tools in which we've used, as I stated, is the Google Workspace. You also have your Slack, right? Some people like Microsoft Teams. These are good tools for you to begin to collaborate as a team effort. But it's not good for you if you're going to be working on anything that's time sensitive. And it's also good for emails and meetings. And then, of course, you see next we have video conferences, which is always good for check-ins. It's good for emails. And a face-to-face meeting is always great. Like I always encourage face-to-face meetings. I know we're in the age of technology. COVID has pushed a lot of people behind the screens, but it's possible. A face-to-face meeting is perfect because it allows you to just be able to communicate one-on-one. Okay. And the last is just a phone call. I mean, as I stated earlier, if you can just pick up the phone, right, and call someone, especially if there is an urgent manner, if there is an issue with situations where you're having an issue with any of your tools, you may have an issue with video conferencing, then it's good to be able to pick up the phone and make that phone call. And that's one thing that I definitely suggest. All right, so let's talk about a few effective listening skills as we get ready to wrap it up. I know we're a little bit behind the time due to technical difficulties, but I want to thank you all for sticking in. So the effective listening skills is, I'll just highlight the four that we have here, and then we'll share these afterwards. But you want to pay attention. So if I'm talking to someone and they need me to understand what's being said, right? You want to pay attention. That's easier said than done. So it's showing here, and we know that we need to pay attention, but everything is vying for our attention. A lot of things bring distractions, and that's a different topic for a different day. But again, you want to pay attention to the person that's speaking to you. The next thing is you want to avoid interruptions. Again, that ties back into the interruption ties back into not being able to allow the distractions to take you away. A lot of times, when you are distracted, you have a lot of interruptions, but we want to be sure, we want to make sure that we are avoiding, those interruptions. The next one that we have also, as we talk about different interruptions, is using nonverbal cues, right? So what's a nonverbal cue? A nonverbal cue is like what I spoke about earlier. So you have verbal communication where you are talking, right, and you're able to just verbalize, but then you have a lot of people, again, that result to nonverbal cues. So when they result to those nonverbal cues, they are now at that place where, although you are using your body language to communicate, but you can use it in a positive manner, right? And so my nonverbal cue will actually be more along the lines of, all right, I'm communicating, I'm talking, but also, you have that smile on your face, right? You are just nodding your head. Those are good nonverbal cues. And then last, you also just want to ask clarifying questions. Okay, so to make sure that I'm listening or that the person is listening, it's good when they ask follow-up questions. There is nothing wrong with a follow-up question, because what are they doing? That person is clarifying that what they are hearing is correct, right? That they are understanding, that they are fully present, right? And that they can respond appropriately to your message. So these are really good, having that clarifying question. We can go to the next screen. And then lastly, we're just the presentation and listening skills. It's kind of like what we're doing here today. You want to be able to present, and you also want to have digital skills, especially in today's environment, right? You have to be able to merge the technology with our presentation skills. And that involves effectively communicating our information, our ideas, and data. And we want to use different digital tools and platforms, right? So these different skills are valuable in various fields. When it comes to effective communication, critical thinking skills, managing information, continual learning, right? Even being just technologically proficient, we want to ensure that we are having those presentation and listening skills. And we can go to the next one. So I wanted to get us here to this point because I want to make sure that I am mindful of everyone's time, but I did want to allow time for Q&A. And if you guys have any questions, we definitely encourage it. Hopefully, also let us know if you learned anything new, right? If any type of value was provided to you, if it gave you anything to think about, feel free to put it in the chat. We definitely just want to hear back from you all. So we're going to use the next few minutes to just have a Q&A. And I'm going to the chat now. Let's see who we have. I can say for me, while we wait for anyone that may have a question or answer, just understanding the subject of communication is very vast. And a lot of times, I've learned that we'll think that we have effectively communicated with someone, but it can be in a way of being passive, right? We can be assertive. Whenever you guys get the chance and you actually research it more, some people are aggressive communicators. And that's the person that whenever they are communicating, it's just a lot of aggression, right? And so those are just some of the things that I've learned. I'm learning how to, effectively communicate across the board and not taking for granted that what I said, the other party understood it, because they may have not understood what I said. So that's one part. Okay. So looking at some of the questions here, one thing I see, Barry, this is good. Barry said he certainly learned some things and some things to work on. I agree, Barry. And I feel like even going through this, we're all, definitely still learning. And, this is very good. Just seeing how the different communication styles are, and then being able to take away, how we can work on the parts that we would need to work on. And Jessica, I see your question here. She says, I struggle with anxiety while presenting in a meeting. What do you recommend to limit that anxiety? That's a really good question.
And we had someone else in the chat too that accidentally sent it to a direct message, but Annette Stanley said that she also learned helpful tips and she too struggles with anxiety while presenting in meetings.
Okay, that's really good. And you know, I dealt with this, if I can share this with you guys, when I first had to present in my first meeting. Just a quick story, if we have a few minutes. So a few years ago, when I started to work in a different part of IT, I was working under a program manager. And I remember he told me, I'm going to be out of the office on Monday, and I need you to be the presenter in our regular meeting. And that was my first time presenting to a lot of stakeholders, managers and supervisors. And I had extreme anxiety, just like what Jessica is talking about. And I just remember I know how that is with your heart pounding and you want to present well. But when I went into the meeting, I was able to present, but afterwards, the whole time I kept hearing, I did not do well. And, my manager reached out to me and he said, hey, you did a good job, and we were on to the next subject. And that actually lightened the load for me. And it helped me to understand that, we're humans, right? And so a lot of people will offer you grace when you just show up. A lot of times you have to show up. I recommend preparing before the meeting as much as possible, but there's still going to be that place where you may have issues, right? Today I had issues with my technology, right? But you learn through it to continue on. And as you keep going through it, practicing, small meetings are good, big meetings are good, right? Being able to just kind of even learning the public speaking, as Tanicia mentioned earlier, all of that will help with that anxiety, and you'll begin to see it, dwindle away. But it's just about getting in there, so to speak, right? Getting in a river, and you're going to begin to have a habit and making it a practice. And, it's like a lot of people say, practice makes perfect. So that's what I definitely recommend, Jessica, to limit that anxiety. And
then so we did have
see.
another question from Zamora. It says, when or how did you gain the ability to point out when you are not effectively communicating?
So Zamora, that's a good question. I mentioned at the beginning that over a year ago, I started kind of having this thing about I'm talking to people, right? And I'm telling them what my need is, but it's like they're not receiving it. And then so I began to really wonder, and again, started reading different materials, and I started to learn I'm not communicating effectively. Not only am I not communicating effectively, I'm passive in my communication, meaning the first style that we talked about, the passive communicator, that's exactly where I was. And I didn't realize it, that I was very just passive, go along to get along, never stated my opinion. And it actually tied into just having that fear and that anxiety of speaking up, especially in the workplace. It can be intimidating when you have a large group, and you can sometimes feel like your opinion doesn't matter, that that's all in your head. And so that's when I finally started to realize it some more. I started noticing how I wanted to get my point across. It was in my head, but it would never come out of my mouth. And so I remember just reading a Bible scripture in the book of Nehemiah. I don't know if any of you have ever read the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. If not, you should. But I noticed that when he went to the king to talk to him about what he needed to do, Nehemiah was almost like a project manager. And if you know any project managers, they are good at planning. They work their plan and then they execute their plan. But then one thing that stuck out to me, I said he was an effective communicator. He always talked to his team about not only what needed to be done, this is how we're going to do it, and want to stick with it. When he went to the king, he was able to go over and tell the king exactly what needed to be done. And because he opened his mouth and effectively communicated, what he needed was provided to him and more. And so that's when I really began to realize that my communication style is off. Not only is it off, I was missing out on a lot of opportunities because I didn't open my mouth and speak about what I needed. And so that's how I began to gain really that confidence and then understand what I needed to do. And so hopefully that makes sense. Do we have anybody or anything else? I think we had a raised hand. Okay, Melanie Faison, raised hand. Did you want to come off mute?
Yeah, I'm off mute. I was just going to add to the conversation about practicing, and if you have anxiety when you present, the biggest thing is, like you mentioned, to practice and to do a dry run with the coworker or someone at home and be very, very familiar with the material. And also give yourself grace because you're human and the people that you're presenting to are human. So humans make mistakes and it'll be all right. Just keep going. So this is a very good webinar. I've got a lot out of it. And another thing about, I wanted to add about communication is that fear can stop you from effectively communicating. People in leadership and coworkers, they want to know your opinion and what you think on the topic or information that you may have is unique to your skill set, unique to your experience, and no one else may have those ideas. So when you hold back from the progression of the project, you hold back from the team being successful and winning. So everybody matters in an organization. And so that's just what I wanted to share.
That's really good. And that's true. You know, when you hold back, I mean, how can you collaborate? And it really stops the flow of the progress of any project, any teamwork, right? And so it just definitely stops that flow. Do we have anything from anybody else before we get ready to close out?
And we had a couple comments in the chat one from Annette. She said, great webinar. Thank you. From Jessica as well. She said, great webinar. And then Julia Carter stated that she definitely agrees that the more familiar you are with the information being presented, the more confident you are with presenting it.
That's absolutely right. That's right. It's like I can present something to you that I've dealt with or been through, but if I haven't dealt with it, then I wouldn't be able to present it to you. I definitely thank you guys for the feedback. Anybody else before we get ready to close out?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Samora. Hi, Tanicia. Hey, everyone. Hope y'all are having a good day and God bless you. I just wanted to comment on how just seeing all the different forms of communication. First things that came to my head is, yeah, I see how that person communicates like that in my life when I interact with them, and I see how that person interacts that particular communication style. But then after that went by, I was like, whoa, I can see me in how I'm passive at times. I can see me in how I'm timid at times. I can see me in how I'm assertive at times. However it might come, and just saw all these different things. And even as Barry said in the chat, how I want to, continue to work on it, just being able to point those things out during real-time conversations, whether that's just with the clerk at the grocery store or whatever it might be, any form of an interaction. So just being able to see, personal flaws, but also not just beat yourself up, but I can actually, practice and get to that better communication. So, thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we'll get ready to go to our last slide. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining. If you guys, we're definitely going to be sending out a follow-up email as well as a survey. And again, if you need more resources, we invite you to visit our website. It's cbwni.org. intl.org. So that's short for international. And on our website, we offer a range of resources and services. And then also you can see our events on our event page. We're going to be hosting monthly events, right? Local meetups, virtual events, Bible studies, and even webinars. Our webinar next month is going to be about, content creation. And I think a lot of people will enjoy that. If you create content, if you're into design, if you want to learn more about Canva, I believe the webinar that she's going to go over is going to teach a lot about Canva. So you want to make sure that you are subscribed to our newsletter and our event. So when this information comes out, then you'll be able to receive it in your inbox. So if you guys don't have anything else, I want to thank you all for joining. Thank you for your patience today. And I hope you all have a happy 4th of July.
Same to you. Thanks.
Thank you, baby.